Okay, check 1 2, check 1 2. Testing, testing. Should be live and good. Please hit the like button. It really helps fuel the algorithm. And we should have a very interesting stream tonight. We're going to be talking about Stephen Greer and his latest discussion with Curt Jaimungal and the concepts that were brought up in that talk. The full discussion is linked below. I highly recommend watching their entire talk when you have the chance. It is always worth watching the entire streams that we discuss on here, because if you're watching this, I don't take things out of context, or at least I always try not to, but that doesn't mean that there isn't value that I wasn't able to cover. So always recommend checking out those discussions. Eventually I will figure out a way so that my ukulele is picked up well by the mic instead of, I don't know, I think I have the gain tuned too high, something like that. But like I said, please hit the like button and comment in the chat any questions that you may have, and we are going to get into it. Stephen Greer is somebody who, listening to him speak, to be quite honest, frustrates me a lot. And that has more to do with me than it does to do with him or anyone else. But I'm being honest when I say that. Just the way in which he discusses things that are so profound and also not confirmable directly is just concerning. He's very, very, I guess you could say, big on pushing the narrative that the deep state is involved in pushing a UFO threat narrative, and that UFOs in general, or extraterrestrials, we're going to just call them, assuming that they exist, are benevolent. He believes that, and that the true malicious forces are human. I'm not against that necessarily, but I'm not supportive of that either entirely. And the problem is who knows? Like, that's the thing, is we don't have. This topic is so convoluted, and there's so much disinformation, misinformation, true information, and the entire space is flooded with the most diverse crowd. I mean, it's almost like the physics crowd at this point, but not the academic physics crowd. I mean, like you could say like the amateur physics crowd. But it's even more just wild. I will say that. But this topic has been one that has fascinated me for multiple reasons for the last few years, and it was one that I had basically come to dismiss. I had come to the opinion that there were no extraterrestrials or aliens, technologically advanced aliens, on other planets in this universe. I still think that that's the most probable scenario, but I'm open to the idea that that's not true. I do think there are technologically advanced beings here that are covertly involved in something, and that are not human, as we know it, at least. And whether that means they're from the future, or whether that means they're divergent lineage from us, from some previous technologically advanced civilization here on Earth, or whether or not it's both, or whether or not they are actually from another planet, who knows. But I tend to lean towards the explanations where they're not, and there's multiple reasons why that is the case. But mainly, we talk here about sentient singularity theory, and it's basically the theory that this universe was created for a purpose by God, and that purpose is essentially replication and the maximization of meaning, and that in that narrative, within how sentient singularity theory proposes the cosmos to be structured, where it's, you go to eventually achieve some technological singularity, which leads to a human singularity after that, or a singularity of consciousness, which is a messianic consciousness, and then it simulates an entire universe again, or in order to reproduce that structure, which is a being, sentient being. That doesn't necessarily seem like it would require beings on other planets. And also, why, if there are beings on other planets that are technologically advanced, like, why didn't they achieve this? Why don't they go through this? I mean, there's a lot that I could be missing, and I admit that, but it's impossible to know what I could be missing, because otherwise I wouldn't be missing it. And but I used to be very into this topic as a kid. Not very into this topic. I was very into space, planes, not even space. I was very into planes, and I still am very into planes. And being into planes, I was fascinated by this alleged aircraft that existed at some point that was called the Aurora, and which was a hypersonic spy plane or test vehicle being operated out of Area 51, apparently. And in that investigation, I came across Bob Lazar, got very into that story. I believe him still to this day. I don't believe everything he was told, but I do believe him, that he worked where he said and he saw what he saw. And but outside that, I don't really get too into the UFO topic. I know recent things, and I did dive into Roswell a little bit, and not even a little bit. I was really looking into it a lot, and there's some things that are fascinating, and some things that are like, that I would say support the common narrative. But it could be that both could have been Project Mogul, which was like the balloon that had those sensors that detected nuclear blasts that the Air Force said had crashed and was responsible for it. And it could be also simultaneously that something else crashed there. And there's reasons to believe both. But I don't follow Stephen Greer very much, but I did watch him on Logan Paul's podcast, and he showed a picture of an alien on there. We'll take a look at it. He also discussed some things, though, that made me have to take him seriously with physics, where he said that people in black projects in these defense contractors, they know that we are inside the singularity of AI and the singularity of consciousness, and that they're aware of it. And the thing is that how does he know that, first of all? And that is what sentient singularity theory, geometric unity, and a number of other proposed unified field theories propose. I mean, essentially, even almost the simulation hypothesis, essentially. And he said that, and how would he know that, not being somebody who has tried, at least as far as I'm aware, tried to map the linear, the logos of the cosmos. And it resonated with me because they would need to know that in black projects if they were going to be able to access technologies that were super far advanced from what we know of currently. Like if they were going to do gravity control type of technologies, like he claims, then they would have to know the underlying nature of the universe to some degree, at least more in depth and better than we currently know in physics, as far as the academic world is concerned. And from what he said, it seems like they do know that. And that was interesting to me. So we're going to talk about a lot of the ideas that he expressed, though, because I have a lot of things that I don't think that don't seem likely. I can't say he's wrong, because I don't know. But, like, they don't seem likely, and I'll give my reasons why I think those ideas would not seem so likely, and why some of those other ideas do seem likely. Some of the things, like he says about there being super advanced nuclear powered digging devices operated by our government and private contractors, and why they might have actually cracked gravity control in the 50s, but why whatever these beings are might not be from another planet and why they might not be benevolent. So we're going to talk about all these things. Like I said, link is below to his stream, and please hit the like button as we proceed. But first, link. And actually, we're going to show his background a bit. He was on this discussion was between him and Curt Jaimungal and Dan from that UFO podcast. And Stephen Greer was originally a trauma doctor. He was an emergency room doctor. He talks about it a lot, and he moved to being a UFO researcher, and he has started the Disclosure Project, and he's got all these documentaries, and he started CSETI, which is the Center for Study of Extraterrestrial Intelligence. He also started CE5, which is like a program for connecting to UFOs and extraterrestrials with meditation, which makes more sense than you would think. I'm going to share some of my experiences that kind of seem to support that might work. But it says Stephen Greer was born in Charlotte, North Carolina in 1955. He claims he saw an unidentified flying object at close range when he was 8 years old. He claims he saw another UFO when he was 35. Greer was trained as a transcendental meditation teacher and served as director of meditation organization. He received a bachelor's in science degree in biology, and he has his MD. He received his medical license in 1989, and he worked as an emergency room physician. In 1998, he retired as a physician in favor of ufology activities. Please let me know if the stream is choppy or not, because it says that it might be, but hopefully it's good. Please comment in the chat. So he has a history of getting a lot of things right. And in the 1990s, Stephen Greer, this is an aside story that I will say that's now in the news, finally, went to Admiral Wilson, who was the chairman of Joint Chiefs. He was the head of intelligence. I'm not the most literate person when it comes to all the different governmental positions, but he was the head of intelligence, and he was an admiral. And he went with an Apollo astronaut, and they had a list of black projects that were alleged to be going on at Area 51, that they, from a bulletin that was like a flyer that was given out to people who were working at the base, saying like some type of scheduling thing, and that was benign. And it said all these, projects are affected and these ones are not affected, or something like that. And he pointed out several of the projects and said that these projects were involved in back engineering of extraterrestrial technology or non-human technology. And it was taken seriously by the admiral, and he went and looked into it, and he found out apparently that this was true. And there's a lot of evidence to support this, and if you listen to Richard Dolan talk about it, or you can listen to Stephen Greer talk about it in other videos, you can listen to other people talk about it, where then there was a discussion that was had between the admiral and Eric Davis, who is a physicist who works for the Pentagon, who works on the UAP program. That is the one that was in the news, OSAP or ATIP, or both. And Eric Davis took notes, and then they were given to this astronaut who was one of the Apollo astronauts. I forgot his name, but I'll look him up in a minute. But astronaut Davis notes. I always forget the guy's name. He died though, and his estate was released, and in his estate were these notes, and they record the conversation, and it was basically the admiral met with the defense contractor, probably Lockheed Martin, who he wouldn't name by name, and they had basically told him, you are not allowed to know what's going on, because the admiral said, you guys, this was an oversight, you should have briefed me, I'm the head of intelligence, and you need to brief me. And they were like, we'll get back to you. And then when they got back to him, they were like, no, you can't be briefed because you don't have a need to know, but we have back engineering programs for non-human technology going on, that's all you get to know. And then apparently he was told not to push it further, or else his career would be threatened. And what was Wilson? What was his name? The astronaut. His name was here. Everybody talks about everybody else, but nobody says this guy's name. Because it was like he shouldn't have had them, essentially. I'll have to look it up. Maybe if you guys know it, comment it in the chat. I always forget the guy's name, and I feel bad. But he died, and that's how these notes were released. And Stephen Greer appears to have been right. He wrote about this in his book, in the 90s, and then now, as of like last year, these notes came out when this astronaut had died, and it validated a lot, and there's a lot of things in the notes that support other bits of evidence that have come forward. So Stephen Greer has a history of revealing things that seem to be correct and monumental, and I don't want to say useful, because I don't know how useful it is to know that the government's working on this stuff, but that are credible. And but he also says a lot of other things. So and he's got a lot of criticism, but I'm not going to get into the criticism that he's faced, but I am going to talk about some of the ideas that he has stated that I don't know how much I can agree with. But he tried to have like a little mummy tested once that he thought was extraterrestrial, and apparently the DNA results came back as not. But who knows? If there are extraterrestrials and they're flying around, they're capable of manipulating anything. So it's hard to know what would be real and what could be trusted and what couldn't, if that is correct. But as I've stated on here too, I have seen, as of this year, for the first time, I've seen in 2 instances UAPs or UFOs. I filmed one of them, and the other one was much more recent. But I did find out that same time period that I saw my last one, there were instances of it being reported in my area, and I did get a couple videos that other people had taken, and I'm putting together like a video montage that for a future stream where we're going to talk about the multiple videos of the same phenomenon that I saw each time, because now at this point I have multiple videos of, I think, each time of the 2 times that I've seen unidentified flying objects in above Los Angeles. And it's not just me who says, I saw something. It's like I filmed one of them, multiple other people filmed them on the same day in the same spot, and it's clearly the same phenomenon. And I actually want to even contact our emergency services, because they had a helicopter that was like checking it out, and then it vanished before my eyes last time I saw one, and I want to see what they have to say before I do another stream on it. But we will do a stream on it. But I have the video up on my YouTube channel if you'd like to see it. But here we go. First clip. I'm gonna find the name of that astronaut. eventually. This first clip is on Stephen Greer talking about how the biggest secrets are man-made, not extraterrestrial or non-human. I'll just call them non-human as we know it, because I don't even know if that's calling them non-human would be accurate.
Now, we've had those sort of technologies since 1954, 68 years. Many of these objects that people see of various shapes are man-made. Now, that's a bigger secret than the ET story. Why? Because if it were to get out that we've had those sort of technologies since 1954, 68 years, and we didn't need to have rockets blowing up and killing space shuttle astronauts and the Apollo accidents that killed Apollo astronauts, and jet fuel that when a plane crashes goes into a ball of fire, and the damage to the environment and half the world in poverty since the 50s. This would be 1,000 times more scandalous than Watergate. So they want the UFO subculture and the media that's begun to jump on this bandwagon to say, oh, this is we don't know what this is. Well, we do know what it is. This is one of the big problems. There's this big gulf between what's known in covert programs and what, say, the people on the Senate Intelligence Committee or Armed Services Committee or these other oversight committees in the Congress, or for that matter, the President and the National Security Council. Everyone thinks that those folks have an all-access pass. They do not.
Okay. I totally believe that. It seems like the most classified stuff is definitely in private projects. It couldn't be in the government, in government possession at this point. It's fascinating, though. Richard Dolan talks about this a lot, with it, like, the UFO subject is much more responsible for the destruction of our freedoms and our governmental openness in this country than most people would ever imagine. And he makes many claims that he thinks support this, and I think it makes a lot of sense. But basically, these projects have mostly been moved to under the control of defense contractors, and of course they would. They're the technological experts, and they are how you hide information from Freedom of Information Acts. And so it makes a lot of sense. But what's interesting about this that he's stated, and first of all, I do agree with this. I agree with him that if then these technologies exist, like if gravity control, we're just going to call it that for now, exists to where you can do warp type transportation, or you can, move without inertial consequences and fly without inertial consequences, then that is super profound. If there are humans who operate that type of technology at this point, because why it has so many different implications. Like, why is it not being used in wars so far as we know? Why do they use F-117 Nighthawks, like the stealth fighters, to blow up, like, Saddam Hussein, instead of TR-3Bs that are, anti-gravity, nuclear powered, total stealth, hypersonic aircraft, space planes that allegedly exist. Like, if that level of tech exists, why are we using F-22 Raptors? Like, there's a huge, amount of implications if that's true. And I do think that some of this is true, and we'll talk about it. And this coincides a lot with what Eric Weinstein has stated, where Stephen Greer says, according to his sources, we cracked gravity control in the 1950s, in 1954. Eric Weinstein stated that it does appear that something happened in the 1950s regarding gravity control, and that then it all went silent. And that there does seem to be a trend of that happening with multiple scientists over time, there was a scientist. Her name was Professor Lee. She was a Chinese American scientist and professor of physics, I think, and she had made a claim to be able to manipulate gravity and somehow, and she published it, and it was peer reviewed, and it came out, and it was like the stir of physics at the time. And then she got a contract with the government for hundreds of thousands of dollars, and then she disappeared. She quit her job, started a company, disappeared, and nobody heard from her after that, really. And I think she's died since, but only recently. But her company continued to function, and she claimed that, actually, it didn't work and it was a misunderstanding, sorry, but I'm going to continue to get funding from the government. My company's going to continue to be funded, and I'm not going to return to my old job at the university. I'm just going to continue to work on stuff nobody knows about. Like, that doesn't make sense. And this has happened multiple times to multiple people, and that was just one of the more recent ones that it's pretty well documented because it was more recent. But if that's the case, I mean, I agree with Stephen Greer. That is profound. If we have human groups that are in control of these types of technologies. Now, he has stated the reason why it's not shared, and there's multiple reasons why some of these would not be shared, and I'll get into it, but is something that, again, he shouldn't know, but sentient singularity theory suggests he's correct on, which is that he said gravity control is in the same constellation of technologies as like mind control. And that is one of the main things that they're trying to not have get out, is like mind control and hypersonic, flying and warp or whatever. You could warp like bombs to places and stuff, and that would be a big deal. But honestly, I think the biggest deal would be mind control, mind manipulation. And that doesn't mean making people do whatever you want. It means like you could screw with people's minds in certain ways, and control their information processing to some degree with the same principles, understanding of the same principles that allow for gravity control and potentially warp or something like that. That makes sense according to sentient singularity theory. As crazy as that sounds, it makes sense. Like maybe you could freeze someone, you could pause their ability to process information and just have them like sit there, aware but unable to move. And, there are stories of this happening that are pretty credible. And that is something that makes a lot of sense. And a lot of these technologies also, the amount of power that they would require nuclear power plants, and at least from us. And if they're using that, there's a lot of legal issues with that kind of thing, and nuclear power has to jump through a ton of hoops if it's not classified. And the TR-3B hypersonic anti-gravity aircraft that supposedly exists, that thing is supposedly nuclear powered, and that is illegal technically. You can't have nuclear powered aircraft legally right now, I don't believe. They did try and create nuclear powered aircraft in the 50s, and Russia did it and the United States did it. Russia flew one, I think the United States flew one, but there was too many issues with shielding from radiation, and the radiation that could be dumped in to the atmosphere, and also if they explode, like, that's not good. But it's interesting that those stories, like I said, I'm very into aviation. I've looked into those stories a lot. The shielding was so heavy that it presented a lot of problems for the American attempts to create a nuclear-powered aircraft, a nuclear-powered bomber that basically wouldn't need to be refueled. It could just fly indefinitely. So that was an issue. But in Russia, all they did to overcome this was they were just like, screw this, we're just going to not have this shielding that the Americans are trying to have, and we're just going to use old people as pilots who, if they die of cancer in 10 years, like, at least they're already in their 60s and 70s. That's like the most Russian way of handling everything. It's like when America tries to create a pressurized space pen, and like the Russians are like, let's just use pencils. But in this case, it's like, let's use old people because radiation, like cancer, doesn't matter as much to them. So it's just fascinating. But there's a lot of reason to believe what he just said. But the implications of it are huge, and honestly, they disturb me. If we have gravity manipulation or gravity control since the 50s, and mind manipulation technologies and things like that, that is extremely disturbing to me. Even though I think we do, I actually believe it. And one of the things that I've stated on here before is that if you look at the growth of technology, it is exponential. And if you look at, our fossil fuel use to nuclear power to whatever is supposed to come next, we don't have anything next. And we should have had it already. It should have been less time between fossil fuels and industrialization in that manner to going towards nuclear power than it is from nuclear power to whatever is next. Whatever 0 point energy or whatever it is that they claim is the next step, that has not manifested in the public, and that implies that our physics are being screwed with. And this is part of the reason why I think that Greer is wrong about the benevolence of whatever these non-human beings are that are around, is that if our physics are being screwed with, it is on such a scale that humans are not competent enough in enacting. And I know I have a background in politics, and I've seen things, and I know how incompetent government can be. I also know how competent groups of people can be, and it's a superposition that you're dealing with there, where groups of people can be extremely competent in covering something up and or accomplishing a task. Governments are usually very bad at covering things up, very bad at accomplishing a task. But the degree to which you would have to manipulate our culture in order to cause our academic physics community to be veered so far off course that they had gravity control in the 50s, and now we just have been speculating on string theory for like the last 50 years with no context to it, is huge. Like I think it would take abilities beyond just humans, and I think it would not. It just, looking at the landscape of this, I do think we're being screwed with, but it looks like whatever's screwing with us has abilities and intelligence beyond us. And I don't think that it's just humans. It might be also humans. That is actually almost a certainty, but I don't think it's just humans. But next clip. But Eric Weinstein did say he thought that it looked like they had cracked something with gravity in the 50s, and then it all went dark. And it's funny because, what's his name? He's the string theorist.
Gravity control.
His name is Ed Witten. Ed Witten, his father was one of the premier, I think his father was one of the premier gravity researchers in the world and was heavily involved in all that. And now his son is like the champion of string theory, which is like, might be like a psyop. That doesn't mean it's not correct. I do think that a Calabi-Yau manifold is a real thing, but I just think that it's like that the way they're looking at it isn't leading anywhere. It's the manifold of your mind's ordering of information into a hierarchy and differentiation and all that. I think that's what a Calabi-Yau manifold is. But String theorists don't even have they don't think about that at all. Like, they just say it's a 6-dimensional manifold at every point in space and time. What does that even mean? I don't know. Maybe it's everywhere that you look because it's in your mind. But why has physics not advanced? It hasn't at all. And don't talk to me about the Higgs boson. I don't think that physicists have a clue what's going on about the Higgs boson. I'm not claiming I do, but I don't think they do either.
That is tied into the whole 0-point energy aspect. That began to be experimentally observed by T. Townsend Brown and others back in the 1920s, where very, very high frequency electromagnetic signals at voltages in the millions of volts, but at low power, would cause objects to look like they're levitating. And that was done in the 20s, so these are well documented. What most people don't know is that October 1954 is when these clandestine projects within the U.S. government mastered gravity control, quote unquote. I'm quoting from a redacted top secret document, but my people here in Washington, one of whom was the chief scientist at the Naval Research Labs, who is, of course, it's the biggest Department of Defense lab, and Thomas Edison started it. He, Richard Foch, who's now passed away, he went into the vault where a lot of these documents are kept and saw the document that stated point blank that we mastered gravity control in 1954. This brings up a big problem in the UFO community, and also with the congressional hearings that are happening here. People look at those objects and they think that if it's not a jet fighter or a rocket, because those were all like 30s, 40s era technologies, it has to be, quote unquote, extraterrestrial or alien. I'm going, that's nonsense. Most of what these objects are that people see are from my uncle worked for Northrop Grumman his whole career and had worked on the lunar module, landed on the moon with Neil Armstrong in it. And so Northrop Grumman and Lockheed Martin and Booz Allen Hamilton and EG&G, we know who the contractors are and where their facilities are. Many of these objects that people see of various shapes are man-made. Now, that's a bigger secret than the ET story. Why? Because if it were to get out that we've had those sort of technologies since 1954, 68 years, and we didn't need to have rockets blowing up and killing space shuttle astronauts, and the Apollo accidents that killed Apollo astronauts, and jet fuel that when a plane crashes goes into a ball of fire, and the damage to the environment and half the world in poverty since the 50s, this would be 1,000 times more scandalous than Watergate. So they want...
Okay, so here's the thing. Corporations that are technology based, whether that is oil companies or Apple Computer or Tesla, even with Elon Musk, they do want control. Every bit of incentive to them is to have control over you. That's true. From everything from planned obsolescence to the lack of hard switches on your technological devices that could turn off, your microphone or your camera or your grid access, your internet access. None of those things are likely to be implemented by any mainstream technology company. And there's dark forces that societally manipulate us, satanic forces, that is a fact, that do not want us to have sovereignty, technological sovereignty. But there's also people that are not just spiritual forces that do not want to give up control over us. Tesla wants to be able to shut down your car whenever it wants. You haven't made your payment? Shut down. You are wanted by the police? The state wants to be able to shut down your car so that they don't even have to go on a wild, goose chase down, the 405, like against you. They don't want to have to put spikes out on the highway. They just want to, just shut down your car. And they will be able to do that. I guarantee you. That will never not happen. It will absolutely happen. And everybody will hears that and is like, oh yeah, why? I wouldn't want them to be able to just shut down my car. But you don't want that enough to not get the technology. And the company who's creating the technology, the contractor, technological contractor like Tesla or Lockheed Martin or whatever, Apple, doesn't want to give up their power. And the government wants power, so they want the ability to shut down your Tesla, or to like listen in on your phone calls and stuff like that if they want to. So they're not going to fight for your freedom from tech company tyranny. And the tech companies aren't going to fight the government that much for your technological liberty, because it all is entangled. Like, they all have the same goal, essentially. And that, though, doesn't explain why we've never successfully escaped fossil fuels in the mainstream. Even if it's possible, and I do think it's possible, why has it never happened? Even though certain people have made breakthroughs and their research goes dark and stuff like that. But why has it never, not a single group of people has ever been able to be like, guys, check this out. We just, made a flying saucer that runs on 0-point energy or something. Like, it's never happened. And I think that's, like I said, because we are under the manipulation, at least, of beings beyond us. Maybe they're extraterrestrial. Maybe they're transdimensional, whatever that means. We're going to get into it. Maybe they're Atlanteans, whatever you want to call them. But they don't want us to have power either. And that seems pretty clear if they are here and they do exist. If they were against the government and the corporations oppressing us, then they would have helped with that in a noticeable way. And that has not happened. There is some evidence that they have tried to, stop a nuclear war, but that that benefits them. Like, that's not just about us. I don't think it's just that they care so much about us. I think that there's some of them might care about us, but that doesn't mean that that's the reason why they stopped nuclear war. But they seem very concerned with our nukes. We're going to talk about it because they talk about it in this stream. But I do agree with him that there is like a deep state that is involved in the growing of its own power, and we're going to this next clip is about that.
Is this a private group, or is it a group that's affiliated with the US government?
No, this is, well, okay, you have to understand, first of all, we have to define terms. There's two governments. There's the US government of the Constitution and the people, and then there's a secret government, as Senator Inouye said, in that famous talk when he said there is a secret government with its own Air Force, its own Navy, its own funding mechanism that's above the law and free from the law itself. So this gets into some shadowy stuff, right? So, but there are people on both ends of those governmental spectrum that are very, very supportive. So like right now, I'm in Washington because I'm taking meetings with people who are military officials assigned to the White House and the people who oversee the black budget of the United States and the Congress, that I'm providing the information to the actionable intelligence so that they can penetrate these programs.
That's true. People call it the deep state. It absolutely exists. And it is really just the world's most influential and wealthy and politically connected individuals who cooperate, collaborate, and scheme for their own enrichment and their own growing of power. It's not necessarily meant to be nefarious always, but sometimes, sure, but not always. And but there is absolutely a deep state. All the weird, creepy things that people think are conspiracy theories about powerful individuals having cult-like meetings and weird rituals and stuff, that is all true. That doesn't mean every rumor that you've heard about every individual is true. It's what it means is it's true that those things happen, and they are composed of many of the world's most influential individuals. That deep state, for lack of a better term, is more private and than it is. It's not elected, and it is much more connected to private industry and stuff like that. But it is very entrenched in government, and it does not recognize sovereignty of nations or laws or anything like that, and it's highly linked to intelligence agencies. And it totally exists. It's not an intentionally organized group. It is an organic group of people with a disproportionate amount of power and influence, and that power and influence is to the degree that national borders and sovereignty does not matter. Legalities do not matter. And, it's like the Bilderberg groups and whatever you want to call them. People call it the Illuminati. It's not I don't know about what the Illuminati is. I have no idea. But it might have been a real group at one point. But like the thing is that it's multiple groups, and it's always multiple groups. And, you can look into like Bohemian Grove and all that. That's all true. But it's also just true that individuals want power. And like that, it's an intrinsic, there's no enemy here. Okay. Like if these groups and people have their own agendas and a disproportionate amount of power, but there is no enemy. Human nature and organic, human organization is what causes this. It's not like you need to beat this group and then we're good. There's no one to beat. So I'm not telling you any of this with any agenda to change your behavior. Don't let it change your behavior. It doesn't matter. Just like try and live a good life. But just know there's powerful people, obviously, and they talk to each other. So, but when he says there's two governments, that's true. But whether or not this second government, secret government, has technologies that are to the advanced to the degree that Stephen Greer says is another question. I do think they are somewhat advanced to the degree Stephen Greer says, utilizing illegal nuclear power and at least and stuff like that. Maybe gravity control, that would be incredible. But if they do have gravity control, then they probably also have mind manipulation abilities, which is all of a sudden you're like, it sounds insane, but it might not be false. And that is, like I said, it's something that doesn't concern me, but it like bothers me a little bit sometimes to think about. But because it makes it such that it's not the gravity control that bothers me. It's like if they have mind control technologies that bothers me, because then it's just hard to trust your own mind. And like, I'm not saying that you shouldn't, you definitely should, but I'm just saying it just takes it up a notch as far as like what is possible. But I mean, they definitely use illegal nuclear power illegally so that they don't have like homeowners associations being pissed off that there's like nuclear power underneath their feet. But we'll talk about that. This next clip.
That in a moment, if you want to hear the physics of it. And he also had a device that had a national security order on it that we knew about. I have photographs of it. And it was like a toroid. And it was putting out enormous amounts of energy, way more than you had to supply to it, because it was also accessing this very high voltage electromagnetic charge system that taps into and creates sort of a space-time cavitation from the 0 point. And this is what they're doing.
So everybody talks about 0 point energy. I don't like the term, but there might not be a better one. So there's a being that you're within, and it is moving. And the information that is processing is moving. Just like if you're a cell inside of a human and you're moving, and you're also thinking, and there's information being processed through your neurons, and also your muscle cells are processing information and moving. It doesn't matter if it's informational or physical movement. It's all the same. You're inside a mind. It's all information. If there's an ability to tap into that movement, that is what I think 0 point energy would be. Is like harvesting energy from the movement of the being that you're inside of. And because everybody says, it's almost like it's like tapping into the ether. Yeah, I went to this a couple weeks ago. I went to Texas. While we're in Texas, I saw one of the coolest things I've ever seen, which was we went to this homestead in Waco, and there was a water wheel and a grain mill that is one of 2 operational water-powered grain mills in all of Texas. And it has an old-fashioned water wheel that takes water, pumps it up from a spring, and basically it's like siphoning water from a spring, which is an underground river, basically, that's already moving, and it takes that pressure and pumps the water up. It taps it, really. I don't even think it pumps it. It just taps it. And so it comes up, and then it goes down like, a trough, and then it goes over this this wooden wheel, and with buckets built into it, basically, and it spins this wheel, and then that is used with all these gears to spin this stone grinder inside of the mill, and it grinds up grain and creates flour and stuff. And I watched it do this, and I took videos and stuff. It was so cool. And basically what they're doing is they're tapping the movement of natural forces, in this case an underground river, and they're using that power to power a device that they've built to basically just make flour. I think that 0 point energy, if it is anything, is basically this, but it's much more advanced, where it's tapping the movement of it's like the meta movement of the universe, not just I don't know, like physical movement as we think about it, kind of maybe even like it's like the movement of causation. Essentially, we don't have terms to describe this stuff. That's why everybody uses different terms, but we just don't have the vocabulary to accurately discuss this narrative yet. But I think that it's tapping movement of the structure that we're in. It's like you're tapping the flow of energy that's going on in the universe. That's like the meta energy, if that makes any sense. It's not just I don't know, like doing fusion or something like that makes sense with our current physics. It's like it's something else. It's like you have to take advantage of what I call like the quantum substructure. And the movement of the quantum substructure is being tapped for free energy. And I think that is the only explanation for this type of stuff. I think it actually makes maybe more sense than even like Bob Lazar's narrative of like antimatter energy and like I think there's something to this element 115 story, but still that might even be part of this. That might be how you tap this or something. I don't know this, but when people say you're tapping into the 0 point, and that's what I think it is essentially. It's like super advanced water wheel stuff. Let's go to the chat. Want to know more about this? powered device he saw in the Southwest desert. Yeah. What if random rich dudes are paying engineers, mechanics to create advanced teleportation tech and other stuff? I think it has been going on. They probably microclassified everything to do with the programs. Yeah. Conspiracies grow just like trees and everything else. Yes, they do. Tesla is ubiquitous to these types. Even so, Tesla didn't write like this. His contemporaries have made and said wilder, but made and said wilder. Yeah, Tesla was way different than everyone else. Him, and then there was Walter Russell too. Like the two of them had an understanding of the universe that was beyond, like Edison or something. Lewis Witten's son, Ed Witten. Yeah. What if they had gravity control in the 20s, but tried to hide it even now to maintain military power? But that's the thing; it's not being used for the military. So what military power? It's not being used for the military so far as we know. There's stories about like secret space programs where they're like on Mars, and maybe that's true. But where's the TR-3Bs that are bombing Al Qaeda? Like, it's not happening. Like, they've put so much effort into contemporary traditional technologies that, like F-22 Raptors, and we're coming out with a new stealth bomber next month. I mean, it's already developed, but they're unveiling it next month. It's called the B-21 Raider. And it is the successor to the B-2 stealth bomber, essentially, and it's even more stealthy, and it's got a number of upgrades that we know about and some that we don't. It's supposed to look pretty similar, but it's being unveiled next month, like to the public, and the program is known, like it's happening. It's to counter China, like that's why they're doing this. But that B2 is pretty incredible, and these B-21s are supposedly even stealthier. The B-2 has never been detected by a foreign government ever, by a foreign adversary at least. But that's pretty amazing. I mean, it hasn't gone up against China so far as I'm aware, but or even Russia, but it was made to go up against Russian technologies in the Cold War. It's a pretty amazing vehicle. I mean, even our F-22s can be detected, but that B-2 has never been detected so far as we're told. B-21 is supposed to be even stealthier. Why are they making that if they have hypersonic stealth, anti-gravity, nuclear-powered craft? I mean, other than the fact that nuclear power is illegal in airplanes, which is probably why they'll never release that TR-3B if they have it. But why are they not using those things in war? Like, why not? I mean, people talk about... I think Stephen Greer has said that there are aircraft that are like hundreds and hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of feet across, that are operated out of black sites by Northrop Grumman and Lockheed Martin. What's the point of that to me? I'm not saying that these technologies don't exist, but I do think that some of these things don't make sense. But there's obviously information that we're missing, so of course some of it won't make sense. This is something that does make sense. This is a statement by Stephen Greer about a classified technology that I totally believe exists, and it's about nuclear-powered digging devices. This next clip.
And so I mean, nothing all that extraordinary, except we did observe this sound of drilling. And of course, it reminded me of back in the 80s, all the New Agers were going on about the Taos hum, and, around Taos, New Mexico, and out in that area of northern New Mexico. And of course, that was the Bechtel nuclear-powered tunneling machine making the connector between Los Alamos and the Dulce area, which cannot be accessed from the ground or above, but only from tunneling. And that was, that device was brought on in the 60s, 70s. But of course, it's classified as nuclear powered, so people would not like the idea of some nuclear powered thing running under their land. But that's how you connect, say, from Edwards to Nellis or Los Alamos to Dulce. And so it sounds like, from what I understand, that's happening at the Skinwalker Ranch, probably connecting out to another facility like the Dugway Proving Grounds or someplace like that.
Okay, that makes perfect sense. Okay. Our government currently uses nuclear power to power submarines and warships of multiple kinds, I think, at least aircraft carriers for sure. And I mean, these submarines are pretty amazing, and so are these aircraft carriers. They basically can go 20 years, decades without refueling. The only thing they're limited by is food for people, basically. And because, I mean, even these submarines make their own oxygen and make their own water. These aircraft carriers make their own water, I believe. I mean, they're incredible vehicles, but they don't need to worry about, shielding because they're not an airplane. So like you don't need to worry about weight. So you can have very heavy shielding over these nuclear reactors. And the thing about the TR-3B real quick is that it's supposedly gravity or a mass and mitigation that is happening there. So it might not be subject to the same constraints as like an aerodynamically conventional nuclear powered plane, like they openly did and tried to create in the 50s and did create in the 50s. So, submarines and aircraft carriers have nuclear power, but the thing is if you want to create secret underground bases or connect bases in a clandestine fashion or in a very remote area, how do you do this? You can't tap into the grid with your giant tunneling devices, your giant tunnel boring devices that they use to make tunnels everywhere else, that are just powered by electricity or fossil fuels. The infrastructure required for some of these military projects that supposedly exist would be enormous. You would have to, everybody would know you're tapping from the grid. You would have to run power lines. You would have to, buy up a ton of fuel and bus it or truck it to some remote location. But if you wanted to have a very, very long tunnel from Los Alamos to, I don't know, or from maybe, I don't know, McCarran Airport to Area 51 or something like that, you would need the ability to tunnel without the grid and in a manner that didn't require people knowing about you tapping power, and also didn't require a bunch of attention drawing trucking of huge amounts of fuel and base setup just to run a giant digging device, a giant drill. But if it's nuclear powered, then you could drill anywhere you want for a basically indefinite amount of time, and you could be entirely off the grid, and you wouldn't have to notify anybody. Plus, you wouldn't have to constantly be refueling with a bunch of people that now have to know where your clandestine, tunnels are going, where, who have to bus all this fuel into Area 51. I'm sure it's already there, but you would have to bus even more into it. And that means briefing more people, exposing more people to classified projects. None of this is what you want to do. You want a nuclear-powered boring device. It makes perfect sense. It's one of those technologies that's perfectly suited for nuclear power because the weight of the shielding is not a concern. In fact, it's possibly an asset. You want a tunneling device to be heavy to some degree because you need it to push on the Earth, and when braces itself and pushes on the Earth and then goes forward. It needs a degree of weight to apply leverage, essentially, and it's so slow moving, and it's it's not something that you need to worry about crashing over a neighborhood and irradiating like half a state or something like that. It's the perfect technology to make nuclear powered. He says that this exists. It's classified, and he states the company. I forgot what it is. I've looked it up though. It's just it's a construction company that does a lot of government work. It's just like a generic construction company, nondescript. And I totally believe him that this nuclear powered digging device works. I don't know the legalities of it, but I do know that, like he said, you wouldn't want to know if it was drilling underneath your backyard. Or you would, if people did find out, they wouldn't be happy about it. I wouldn't say you wouldn't want to know. You probably would want to know, but you wouldn't be happy about it if you found out that it was happening, and your neighborhood watch and your homeowners association probably not likely to approve of just, classified tunnels below their neighborhoods dug by nuclear powered giant drills for classified projects. If you were allowed to know that was happening, you probably wouldn't want to just be like, okay, whatever you need, I won't ask any questions. It's like, no, you would ask questions, and then you would know where things are that you're not supposed to know where they are. And these supposed like deep underground military complexes, which they definitely exist. You can look up some of the ones that have been declassified as to their location. Trust me, there's at least twice as many probably, or at least as many definitely, that are classified. And there's, according to interviews that he's done with people who are family members of intelligence officials of the United States, there's like maglev trains that run from like the White House to deep bunkers in the Blue Ridge Mountains and stuff like that. That might be. And how would you drill that? With a nuclear powered digging device. Like, otherwise, there's no way for people not to know what you're doing. It's too big of a project. Now he says that they just basically are like, they like melt the rock and glassify the sides and stuff. I don't know if that's true, but I totally believe that the government uses nuclear powered boring devices. I've never thought about it until I heard him talk about it, but it is the technology that makes perfect sense to use nuclear power for in so many ways. Okay. Man, we keep getting the bots in this in the chat. But high energy flow type. Please comment in the chat what the stream is like, if it's good and not choppy. Also, I see 12 people watching and only 6 likes. Please, if you are finding this content valuable, hit the like button. It really helps fuel the algorithm and lets other people see this that otherwise would not. And we are this entire channel is fighting upstream in every way. It is fighting against academia. It is fighting against censorship. It is fighting against corporate political correctness. It might be fighting against the deep state. Who knows? But maybe against ETs. I have no idea. But I don't think our likes will impact that very much if that's the case. But it's definitely fighting against academic and just accepted narratives, and it is fighting against the cultural mainstream in every way, basically. So please hit the like button. It does help. I am working on a couple other projects at this point, actually, that are involved with getting this this podcast, these streams on other platforms. And one of them might be our own. Other ones that I'm working on are just alternative, yet to be unveiled platforms. Some of them are already unveiled. I'll probably start putting some of these on BitChute or something like that, just as backups. But just please hit the like button. It does help for now. We're going to use YouTube until they kick us off. Okay, this next clip is on Bob Lazar. I have always believed Bob Lazar. I looked deeply into the story. If you aren't aware of Bob Lazar's story, you should look into it. And there's so much evidence to support.
Put together the mosaic from 1 million data points and 1,100 people.
To support the idea that he is telling the truth. But he was a physicist who asked Edward Teller to help him get a job, who was the father of the hydrogen bomb. And then he ended up getting hired at Area S4, which is just south of Area 51. And it was on a back engineering program for recovered craft from other beings, I will at least say. He said they told him that they were from alien, from Zeta Reticuli star system. I think that was disinformation. I don't believe that at all. I think that regardless of where that information came from, whether it came from those beings or not, I think that that's still disinformation. But who knows? But I do believe that he worked on these craft. They were gravity control craft, and they used exotic power sources. And they were set up. They were fitted for short little beings. There were little tiny seats in this thing. But he never saw, like, the beings responsible.
Credible people who've been in facilities, and then what you look for are corroboration, points of corroboration and data points that line up. So some of what he's recounted would conform with the fact that those assets are there. To the extent that his physics theories about how it operated, I'm not so sure if those are accurate, only because they've never been tested. And moreover, he was there for such a short period of time as a young guy. I don't think he would have been read into that. I'm not sure if that was just one of the things I'm always worried about is that they're onboarding you into these projects. They will give you a certain amount of information, exposure, and disinformation to deliberately. It's a testing process. I know what the procedures are.
How do you manage that, Dr. Greer? Because there's, like you say, there's a lot of elements that are trying to pour out misinformation, disinformation, and we each have our kind of our tests for what passes through our filter. What's yours?
If I find somebody is providing something that is factually inaccurate, then they are dismissed from the project.
I think that makes no sense, that last statement. I guarantee you almost every single source he has that has provided him with an abundance of information has provided him with false information. You can see he's done a lot of interviews with Richard Doty, and Richard Doty was he was part of Air Force intelligence, and he was involved in counterintelligence, and he was involved in a number of like more high profile instances, and he was assigned to Area 51, I think. And basically his job was to give false information, at least in certain circumstances that involve these topics. And, you know, I try not to talk about people, and I try not to judge people on this. I try and focus on ideas, even though I focus on specific streams of people talking. I try and focus on their ideas. And I don't like to get into drama, but when I listen to Richard Doty, and I could be wrong, I will say this, I absolutely could be wrong. He speaks like there's not a lot of coherence to what I hear, but it's just like constant, you know, talking. It's like somebody who's very good at and also trained to just speak like they're undercover or something. Like they're just, you know, say something and say it confident enough, you know, and that, I don't know. It just, I don't believe, I think he's still a counterintelligence operative, but he just, it's like, if you look into this this field, what you see is that people who are involved in this topic it's very compartmentalized. And this is a very, very common theme. And this is also true in other classified projects as well, that are not as classified, but still very classified, is that compartmentalization is a standard procedure tool used to, mitigate the risk involved with these, working on these classified projects. Richard Doty speaks as if there was no walls about, that he couldn't just walk through. Like he knows too much if what he's saying is true for me to like believe it. It's like he speaks as if there's no compartmentalization that he ever faced. He knows about this, 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 and it's like none of it is completely connected, but all of it's about UFOs, and it's like a lot of things that you wouldn't give all that information to one person. I don't think that would then be free to just like go and tell the world. And I don't know. I just don't believe it. But it's not that anything that he says sounds like BS. I mean, this is the UFOlogy field, guys. Like, I'm not judging anybody's claims based on whether or not they mesh with the common narrative. But he just knows too much. That's really what it comes down to. Like, if it's true, and that does, I don't trust people that say, who claim to know so much about classified projects and to be read into so much of the details, the dirty details of so many different classified things. It's not how the government operates. And the people who know all the different details, those people are the people who attend those meetings that I was talking about. And they're not counterintelligence agents. They're the people in charge of the people who are in charge of the counterintelligence agents. And like, those guys are not speaking. I don't think that you can just forever discount somebody who says anything that's not correct, especially if you in 2 seconds or two sentences earlier acknowledged that everybody's given disinformation. That doesn't make sense. I think that was not true. His final statement there, but that's fine. I do think that Stephen Greer tries to be meticulous, I will say. Otherwise, we wouldn't be talking about him. If I had no respect for somebody on here, I would never speak about them. I respect everybody who stream I talk about. And, like, even Sean Carroll. Okay. Next clip.
But you see things like this periodically. So one of the problems with the whole UFO subculture, and I think this is done deliberately, in my opinion, is this conflation of everything that's not human. It's either human or alien. So I never use the word alien. Alien to me are all kinds of phenomena. Extraterrestrial may be one of them. Non-corporeal entities, or an entity from another dimension that isn't extraterrestrial, meaning an extraterrestrial biological entity from a star system and a physical star system and planet. But there are other dimensions. And so there can be all kinds of phenomena that begin to be observed and under certain conditions, very physically in this dimension, having an effect that isn't extraterrestrial. And so this is why I keep getting back to this central point that we have to develop a new cosmology. I wrote a paper in the early 90s called ETs and the New Cosmology, where we have to develop this sort of a whole phyla, your biological, the groupings of families of plants and animals, dealing with the cosmos, because it is not just a physical 3D cosmos. There are these other dimensional aspects and beings and intelligences from other dimensions. But where it gets very tricky is that if you are an interstellar civilization, you're not getting from point A to B at the speed of light. you go beyond the speed of light, there's that resonance and frequency. You're moving into another dimension, and you're
This is why I have to take Stephen Greer seriously. I say this and have said this for a very long time at this point, at least like a couple of years. I am not somebody who believes in it is not my nature to believe in ghosts and like, I don't know, like the paranormal. I am a theist, do believe in God. I have talked about an experience that I've had involving that on this channel before. So I can't not believe in out-of-body experiences. I do believe we're inside a mind. So physicality is not as, like, it's not what we think it is. It's not separate from information. It's just whatever the thoughts of the being that you're in, like the mind that you're within, we are going to perceive those as concrete reality, and because their thoughts trump our thoughts. So, but also, I will admit that I have, as a kid, I saw with others, like, we just called them ghosts, and I don't think they're ghosts anymore, or I didn't even know what they were then, but I just saw them, and they were like people. Like, it was like a person would walk by really fast, and like both of us would be like, whoa, did you see a person walk by? Like, that happened multiple times in my house growing up, and as a you know, with adults, okay, not like kids who are like trying to you know, psych themselves into convincing themselves that they had some experience with a ghost. But like, I was in my kitchen once, and we had a family friend who was an adult at the time, and I was like 14, 15. I wasn't a child, and we're sitting there and looking at the TV over the counter, and past the archway, just like on the way to the TV, just walked someone. And like, I looked over the counter because they would end up walking around, like, and be visible over the counter because in the direction that they were heading, just how my house was set up. And the person, family friend who was in the kitchen with me at the time, just like looked at me, looked over, looked back at the archway and looked at me and was like, did you just see a person walk by there? And I was like, yeah. I was like, I didn't want to say anything because I didn't want to creep her out. And she was like house sitting while my parents were out of town, and I just didn't want to like freak her out. And she was like, I totally just saw someone walk by. And I was like, so did I. Like, I told some dude walk by. I don't know who it was, but I don't think they're ghosts. I don't know what they are. Maybe like echoes of like just actions in the universe that, you know, I don't know, you can pick up on like an echo of, it's like an echo, maybe. That's my current theory. I have no idea. But I'm not saying they were conscious entities. I don't think they were necessarily. But I can't say I've had that experience. And I also have a video on here about me seeing what I thought was a dream at the time, but over the years I am more and more convinced that it actually was more than a dream, where I had essentially seen like a demon, like a skinwalker. And I talk about it. I talk about what it looked like. I talk about what happened with it. There's a whole video. It says like I saw Wendigo or something. You can watch it. It's like 15 minutes of, it's just a clip from one of these streams. That was the most terrifying moment of my life. And I also have filmed UFOs. And I know that they were not conventional aircraft because I grew up next to the largest Air Force base in the world. Well, at least it has more planes than any other Air Force base in the world, Davis-Monthan Air Force Base. I've seen the B-2 bomber. I have seen every plane that has been declassified and was made after, 1950. I've seen it and could identify it. And I've lived next to airports my entire life, or Air Force bases. And I see blimps every day here and helicopters every day. And I know which helicopter is, the local police department's NOTAR helicopter, it's called. And then I know which ones are billionaires from Malibu, and I know which ones are the news and which ones are cops and which ones are the hospital. Like, I know. Like I said, I'm into aircraft. I know what I saw was unconventional, and I filmed it. So I can't deny that these phenomena exist. I'm not claiming to understand them all, but I have stated that what I think is the reason why skinwalkers and demons, which I think are demons essentially, are associated with UFOs and ETs or whatever they are, non-human, technological beings, or technologically advanced beings, is because the way that they move is that they're tapping into the quantum substructure of the universe. And so they would be associated with things that exist more in that sphere, I guess, and things that exist on frequencies that are less perceivable as physical things to us. And remember, physicality is not hard. It's not different from information. It's just where you are in your relationship with what is generating that information is determining whether or not you perceive that information as physical, and that it's trumping your information processing. It's higher than your information processing in the hierarchy, or whether or not you're just perceiving it, as information that's non-physical, or whether or not you are perceiving it as, just internal to you, and then it's just specific. It's internal information processing. It's not macro informational processing. But just like when you're driving in the car, there are frequencies that you don't pick up on the radio, and then sometimes you go through that, Palm Springs or something where there's terrible reception, and you're picking up the Hispanic Mexican channel at the same time that you're picking up like the pop station, and you're seeing both. I think that this can happen with things that exist like angels and demons and stuff, where they're on a frequency that we can't normally see. Maybe that's true of ghosts, if ghosts exist. I don't know if ghosts exist. I have no idea. But if they do, then that's probably true of them to some degree. But sometimes your frequency can be like this, and then you'll see a demon. Or like if you take DMT, it changes your frequency. You see things that are always there, but that you can't normally tap into. You can't normally perceive. When you take DMT, you're listening to a station that you don't normally tune to. And I'm not advocating anybody take DMT, but that is what's happening. And that's why people have collectively verified hallucinations where everybody's seeing the same thing. If you're all seeing the same thing, it's not a hallucination, okay? I don't even know if we understand what that word would mean, but I'm just saying, like, if you're all seeing the same machine elf talking to you, like, it's not a hallucination. It's not there. It's there, is what I'm saying. I don't even think the term hallucination is accurate. I think it throws us off. But I've stated this, that these beings that might be physical, like these grays that I think exist, I do believe they exist. I don't think that they're from another planet, but I think they're under our feet. I think they're underground. And from here. But those beings are physical, I believe. Their method of movement is to tap into frequencies of the ether or whatever. We don't, like I said, we don't have the words for this. And where they can use the quantum substructure to utilize entanglement relationships to jump from place to place. If you're doing that, you're literally like jumping in and out of the heavens. Like literally, almost. Possibly even literally, like truly. You're jumping in and out of like the place where your consciousness is saved when you die. And the place where demons and angels are more perceived. And it might make things, phenomena, multiple different types of paranormal phenomenon occur around the same moments, because you're like opening the door, or you're manipulating the frequency of that specific spot or moment, and in your traveling. So you're like, making it for some reason you're changing the frequency of that spot such that now skinwalkers can be seen, like more, or are more likely to be seen. Yeah, just like you're more likely to hear the Mexican station, even though you've got it tuned to the pop station, when you drive through Palm Desert than you are here in LA. That might happen in certain areas or in certain moments, and I do think that does. What he's saying though here is where he's saying they're transdimensional. That's not a good word, because dimensions are not understood by most people. Physicists like sit on their high horse about dimensions, and they're like, oh, it's a degree of freedom and you don't know what it is, and because of that I'm a physicist. But they're also right. But even though most of them I don't think truly understand what a dimension really is, I don't even think I could right now on the spot give it the best definition that I could. But I will work on it. I do have a video on a stream on here if you want to watch it at some point. It's called "What Are Dimensions" or something like that from a while back, and I talk about it. But I think that him saying that these transdimensional beings, or these beings that exist on different frequencies, I think is a better way of putting it, like angels and demons, maybe ghosts, I don't know, are being associated with the way in which these physical beings, like Greys or ETs, whatever you want to call them, are the method in which they're maneuvering is kind of like mixing things up, and therefore associated with these non-physical beings, but they're just alternate frequency beings, we could call them. I think that makes perfect sense. He's calling them transdimensional. It's not a good word. Alternate frequency beings, probably better word. These machine elves, or whatever the heck you see these Wendigo, Skinwalker demons that I saw, that people talk about seeing. My brother fell off a wall. The first most terrifying moment, maybe the second most terrifying moment of my life. First was seeing the Skinwalker, actually, for sure. I thought I was going to die. But the second one was seeing my little brother, fall off a very high wall. It was about 20 feet up. We were having a competition when we were little kids. I was probably 6 and he was probably 4. Like, who could walk along the wall the highest, because it got higher and higher as you walked along it. And I got off and went inside, and he stayed outside. And when I went back, he was sitting way further on the wall where I had said, okay, it's too high, we're done. He was like, oh, look, I went further than you. And I was like telling him to get down. And as he was getting down, he fell. And he ended up getting a concussion and was pretty bruised up. But thankfully, he was young enough to where, like, still pretty pliable as like a 4 or 5-year-old kid. If he was older, he could have broken his neck and died. If he was like an adult, it would have been much worse. But he was still in that like pliable stage of life where you can resist a lot of bumps. And he, on the way to the hospital, he was saying that like an angel caught him. He was like, an angel caught me. And like he was bruised up, but he was not nearly as bruised up as you would have expected. He fell 20 feet onto rock. I thought he had died. Like, I looked over the wall and he was just like laying there, not moving or saying anything. I thought he was dead. And he did have like a slight concussion, they said, but like he didn't even have broken bone. And who knows, maybe an angel did catch him. Like, he was saying it on the way to the hospital. Like, why would you make that up? Like, in that moment, maybe, a week later as a little kid, you make it up or something, but why in that moment when you're like still just freaking out? There are beings around us that we cannot normally perceive. And, but I do think that these non-human entities that are probably, I think Hal Puthoff called them, he called them hyperterrestrial or something like that, instead of extraterrestrial. It was like something else. And I think that's a better term for it. Maybe hyperterrestrial. or super terrestrial, subterranean even, like beings. I have a stream on here called UFOs versus Wasps, if you ever want to watch it, and I talk about how like the evolution of wasps seems to mirror what we see with these beings and why they're probably under us instead of over us, and what they're probably up to, I think. But that what Stephen Greer is saying makes a lot of sense. And also, I have a mentor in life, but also he's in biology. He's a world famous biologist, and he told me that he was in Kingman, Arizona, and he was studying reptiles there. And by the way, everything this man has ever told me that has seemed sensational has proven to be true. And I have not believed him many times and eat my words many times. He told me that he was down in like a valley area. There was like a hill next to him, and over his head flew something. And it flew like down towards the ground, but it went over the hill, and he ran to the top of the hill expecting to see something crashed. He didn't know what it was going to be. And there was nothing there. He was like, it was like it flew over the hill and into the ground. Not even just into the water like they talk about, and there's videos showing these UAPs like going in and out of water as if it's not even there. He said this thing flew through the earth, it seemed. It's like it didn't go down and then go back up like he would have seen it. It just went down, it was gone. And, that has to do with manipulating entanglement and maybe through frequency. And, if you know it's all information, maybe you can change the frequency of the rock for a second and then you could just pass through it. I don't know. But it just means that what Stephen Greer is saying here about, these transdimensional beings could be associated with these physical beings that are ETs, as we call them, because of their method of transportation. I've said that for years. That makes sense with sentient singularity theory. That's why I have to take. It's another one of those things where it's like I have to take him seriously. That's an interesting and anecdote that I haven't heard from others, and it's specific. But it's hard to see past people's words, because if you're a physicist or someone, you're like, oh, he said transdimensional, like Marvel dimensions, where, it's like this dimension of reality and this dimension and this dimension, and there's a Spider-Man in every dimension. Like, that's not a dimension according to physics, so I can't take Stephen Greer seriously. No, there's no terms for this stuff, so, like, we're using what we have. What he's saying makes perfect sense. That's crazy, though. This is him talking about these entities, I forgot who said it. I think it was, who was it? It was like Truman or someone, said, beware of the military-industrial complex. And there's like rumors as to what led to him making that speech, that it involved this topic, supposedly. And that he was like shut out. He was like the first president shut out of the UFO conversation by these contractors, and was like, beware of the military industrial complex. I get that corporations use legal stuff and also beyond extra legal activities when they're intertwined with the deep state to maintain monopolies of and continue to make profits and stuff like that. And I do agree that these aerospace companies are going to face an uphill battle justifying enormous contracts going forward, even though the biggest contracts are pretty recent. I think that it's going to matter soon much more what your software weapons are, much more so than your, how many F-35 Lightnings you have, even though it's a pretty impressive jet. That was the biggest military contract in history, was the Joint Strike Fighter program. But supposedly that's a Lockheed Martin aircraft. They supposedly have a bunch of back-engineered UFO technology, yet they're still making stealth jet planes powered by, oil. It doesn't make sense unless there's someone manipulating the chessboard who isn't even a known player in the game. It's like the person in charge, like we're playing chess against other people, and this country against this country, this corporation against this corporation. Whoever is in charge enough to make it so that we still have the largest military contracts being and hundreds if not thousands of stealth aircraft being produced, running on oil, and all the investment that went into these projects by the same company that supposedly has the most advanced exotic type of technologies like gravity control. If that's happening, and that's true, it means that the person in control is not, the blacks and the reds in this checkers game, or the, whites and blacks in this chess game. It's the person who made the game in the first place and convinced is keeping us playing each other. It's like, don't look up, take his king. I don't think that it's just the deep state. But this is Stephen Greer saying that he thinks it is.
Look, they want everyone to be addicted to some other narrative to replace racism and division on the planet. They want the humans to be united, but against an alien threat. It's a very simple narrative. And it's what demagogues have done, for thousands of years to consolidate power. But this is on a much larger scale than just the British staging, and setting up the Maoris fighting against each other in New Zealand so that they could go in the breach and conquer New Zealand. So, this is a much more sophisticated, high-tech version of that. But that's been a strategy that military planners have done for thousands of years. But in this case, you're dealing with some very advanced technologies, quite capable of deceiving almost everyone involved. And that's a problem, because ultimately what that creates is how do you begin to do you have to set up a system where anything that happens goes through a whole analysis of, is it this, or this? And it's a whole set of things it might be. And I don't see that people are doing that. It's a little bit, I liken this to a doctor. Someone comes in with chest pain and they're so poorly trained, they have to conclude it's a heart attack and treat them for a heart attack, when it could be a dissecting thoracic aneurysm or a pleural.
Or it could be benevolent humanoid beings manipulating everybody. Like, including Stephen Greer. Like, why I don't think anybody should believe that they're above being able to be manipulated in this topic. And he's so well known, he's probably the number one target of disinformation by entities involved with this topic who want to keep it clandestine. He's probably the number one target of disinformation. And there's no way he would be able to sort out what is and isn't truly what is and isn't truly happening all the time. Doesn't mean that he doesn't know things others most don't. I do think he knows things that most people don't, that are true. But I don't think that this idea that these aliens or ETs are just these like Gandhi type beings, as he has described them in other podcasts, that are more consciously evolved than us and more peaceful intrinsically just because of their wisdom, and they're just here waiting for us to achieve their level. That doesn't make sense with my logical extrapolation. It doesn't make sense with sentient singularity theory, really, at least not without other narratives to fill in major holes. And it doesn't make sense with anything that we've seen with humans. The more technologically advanced humans get, the less spiritually wise they become. They don't become more spiritually wise and more all-knowing. They become less spiritually wise, less wise in the everyday. They just have access to more information and, more technological power, but they don't have more wisdom. People were wiser 300 years ago than they are today. But they're just, today you can access the, an Encyclopedia Britannica added every day to this pool of information that is at your fingertips all the time. That doesn't mean you are able to, filter it in a way that is true and relevant and useful all the time, but usually not. Usually it's just like you're being manipulated by corporations that are saying, look at this, look at this, look at this, look at this, get mad at this. And, but at the same time, this technology has not made us wiser. Why would these beings be wiser? One day I'll talk more about this topic. I'm not comfortable talking about it, some things about this topic yet, but I will say that there are things that eventually I would like to talk about. I know that's such like it's like, oh, I've got a secret and you don't know. It's not like that, but I know it sounds like that. But it's just this topic it's complicated. But I don't believe this narrative of these beings are just like monks with flying saucers and endless energy, and they have no goal here other than to, tell us that we need to take care of the environment. This is what people don't understand. There was a landing of craft and at a school in Zimbabwe. I think it was in Zimbabwe, in Africa. This was like 30 years ago, I think, 20 years ago. And dozens of kids saw this. Craftland, little gray beings got out and basically telepathically communicated with these kids, told them all kinds of things, including mainly like stuff about how we need to take care of the environment. If you're a super intelligent and also wise being, and you really think that we need to take care of our environment, do you go to a kindergarten in the middle of Africa and in order to get your message out, and you tell them? You don't go to tap into every single TV station in the world at once and be like, yo, we're here to help. You guys are really destroying the planet. Here's some, Tesla tech. Instead they go to kindergarten kids and tell them. I believe these kindergarten kids, but I don't believe for a second that these beings were just there because they had a mission to tell humanity that they need to take care of the environment. Maybe they were just, I don't know, they just wanted to hang out with the little kids because they were the same height or something. And they were like, oh guys, also, by the way, on a side note, you should probably take better care of your world because maybe it's also our world. But that sounds more like an experiment to me than it does a legitimate attempt at communicative contact with humanity. Like an experiment done by those beings. Or, it's what, I don't know what their point was. Unless it was just, they just wanted to hang out with little kids. Like, why would they even want to do that? I don't know. Maybe they did, but that's more likely than that was a legitimate attempt. First likelihood, that was a social experiment or like a psyop, but still perpetrated by those beings. Second most likely, that incident was just those beings wanted to just hang out with those kids for some reason. And third is, and it was recreational activity. It wasn't like they had a goal. And then the third is that was like a legitimate attempt at contact, which that's BS. Like, I don't think they're that stupid, these beings. That was not an attempt to tell us anything about taking care of the environment. It might have been a side note, but if that was the goal, was to tell them that message, that means that was an experiment or there was a goal beyond actually telling these kids that. It was not that those kids' job was to go to, the world leaders of the world and spread, the message. Like, that makes no sense. They're not stupid if they're here. And it's pretty stupid to think that that's what their goal is. Everybody who's in this New Age community claims that they get like messages of you need to take care of the environment. I do believe that they are concerned a little bit about the environment because I think they live here, and I think they're realizing like we can really make a mess at this point. But I also think that this is kind of a psyop. It's like an attempt to restrict our technological development, I think, in some way. Maybe. But that just seems likely that they would not want us to be so powerful. If they're watching us, they don't want us to be equal to them in technological ability, at least in mass. And anyone who does have access to like technologies that are equal to or close to equal in capability or tactical capability to these beings, I guarantee you they're like communicating with these beings. I can't guarantee you, but I would bet, because I think Bob Lazar even said that he was told this. It doesn't make sense for them to leave. They don't want us as a possible enemy, like that they would actually have to contend with technologically on any kind of serious way. That makes no sense logically at all. So there's something going on. These beings are not, I don't think that they are just this benevolent, federation of monk, Buddhist aliens that are just waiting for us to like stop poisoning the oceans and get along. That doesn't make any sense. There's nothing driving us to do that other than the singularities of consciousness that I talk about in sentient singularity theory that we are approaching, but that doesn't seem to be. It seems like our technology has kept us from doing that, at least as early as we would have organically, which means like they've held us back from that. It implies that they've held us back from that. So why would, if you assume that, which I assume that that is true, I'm just in my hierarchy of assumptions that is higher. Why would it make sense then that also like they're just waiting for us to evolve? I don't believe it. I think that they're using us for reproduction because they destroyed their genes. Next clip. I'm going to try and go a bit quicker. We only have a few clips left. I'm going to need to make a moderator for the chat because these bots were prevalent this stream.
Every second. But it's a waveform. But the scalar and longitudinal are actually a point that goes out longitudinally without the wave. In other words, it's a signal without the wave. And therefore it propagates at significantly greater velocity than the conventional speed of light, but it also can be weaponized. Now, one of the problems, the whole reason this whole modern era of UFO events happened is that when we began to detonate thermonuclear weapons and atomic weapons, everyone knows about the EMP, the electromagnetic pulse. What they don't know is that attendant to that is usually not, we didn't have the instruments to detect it, is a big pulse that actually disrupts transdimensionally ET communications and transportation and other worlds. In other words, it tears the universe in a way that's very destructive because of that big pulse has attendant to it one of these scalar type frequencies, and can be very destructive. So that's why all of a sudden there were all these ET craft around Los Alamos and the Trinity site, the White Sands, and in particular Roswell. People forget that the only place that we had nuclear weapons, atomic weapons, actually at that time in 1947, on Earth was the Roswell Army Air Base. And that's why.
Exactly. Hold on, maybe there's more.
The ET craft were there. We had hidden in a new radar dome, electromagnetic, one of these directional energy weapons in there that scrambled those craft, and 3 of them crashed on the best I count. 2 of them were recovered right away. One was blown to smithereens, one continued further west, and there was another one I think was not found till 1950 or 51, more in the northwest mountains of New Mexico.
I believe that. I've looked enough into Roswell to know that something crashed in Roswell that was... there was something went down in Roswell. That said, if you look at... They said it was a weather balloon at the time. First, the Air Force Base, essentially, the Air Force didn't exist, but it was the Roswell Army Airfield. It was the most elite airfield in the country, in the world. It was the only it was the only military base that had the ability to utilize nuclear weapons at the time. It was where the 501 bomb group that dropped the bombs on Japan was stationed, and also New Mexico has Los Alamos and the Trinity site, and they were doing all their bomb tests there at the time, and so it makes sense that they were being watched by advanced beings who are watching us, test nukes, and so it does make sense that you would see something there. Like, of all the places for something like that to crash, that is the one spot that makes the most sense in the world, is Roswell. That said, if you look at, they said it was a weather balloon after the Air Force Base essentially announced that it was that they had found a downed saucer. They then retracted it and they said, "Oh, actually, it was a weather balloon." Then in 1990s, they said that it was actually Project Mogul, which was a real project that they tied weather balloons to a bunch of detectors made of foil and stuff, and they flew them all over the country high up in the atmosphere, and they were detecting radiation from Russian nuke tests and stuff. But those things crashed multiple times all around the country, and like nobody thought they were UFOs. But if you do look at images of Project Mogul's balloon trains, and then you look at their detectors here, and like I said, if we're being manipulated by a civilization that's way advanced from us, like, you can take every photo that you see online with this stuff with a grain of salt. But if you look here, you see like Project Mogul's trains of foil detectors and stuff here. That does look like this. This does not look like a weather balloon, but what it does look like is these weirdly shaped like detectors that were made of foil, and they hung from like this. Project Mogul radar reflector constructed from aluminized paper over balsa wood frame. That looks exactly like that, guys. So I think this guy, I forgot his name, I think that was him, who found this, said that the Air Force Base, the Air Force had switched the wreckage on him, and that it looked like they had ripped apart a weather balloon, but they'd swapped the wreckage. I think that would make sense if it looked like they ripped apart a weather balloon there, but it doesn't. It looks like there was a ripped apart detector from a Project Mogul, detector train. But the thing is that wasn't declassified till the 90s, so they wouldn't, in order to stage it, they wouldn't have used a destroyed detector from Project Mogul if they were going to claim that it was a weather balloon. That doesn't make sense. So it might be that both of them crashed. Maybe they crashed into each other. I don't know. But I do think there's enough of a common narrative and enough historical evidence for extraordinary claims that of exotic materials and stuff by credible people that makes me believe that something that was technologically advanced crashed in Roswell, in addition to maybe also Project Mogul balloon train. There was like a horrible storm the night that they before they discovered the wreckage. What Stephen Greer says here of like one of them was like annihilated. That is consistent with my research of what I've heard. It's like one of them was annihilated and the debris field was enormous and it was like there was gouges in the ground and like it hit at very high speed and there wasn't big pieces of it left. It's not like they recovered a intact flying saucer necessarily. Maybe they recovered bigger pieces of it, but for the most part, from what I've heard from people who talk about it, who were there, they said it was like it was blown to smithereens. Like, but the wreckage was very exotic. But then there was also like very conventional seeming wreckage too, which makes me think like they might have found also a downed Project Mogul train, and that the pictures that we're seeing are of that wreckage also, and that was, you know, they just picked it all up and they drove it all back. But I mean, if it was just balsa wood and aluminum foil and some mylar from a balloon, you don't think that like guys who were part of the Army airfield that was tasked with dropping nuclear weapons wouldn't be like, yeah, this is like a balloon with like some tinfoil? Of course they would. But if it's mixed in with a bunch of other things that don't look like, you know, like that, then you probably just grab it all and be like, this seems like balsa wood. But then that is like foil that you crinkle it and it expands and you can't dent, you know, that piece of metal with a sledgehammer, which was like one of the anecdotes even. All that sounds really weird. And there were multiple people that found this wreckage, and the police even tried to find the wreckage debris, and they couldn't find it at first, but they found like areas where the ground was like glassified, like it had been heated, almost like a nuke had gone off over there. But I don't think that was where a nuke had gone off where they were. But that does happen where they detonated nuclear bombs. It melted the sand, and it's called trinitite. Is like it's the mineral that that has been named, that was created when they were blowing up these bombs in New Mexico after the Trinity test site. So there's a lot of things about Roswell that make perfect sense. This photo does not support even like that they tried to fake a weather balloon. It supports that like there was a ripped up detectors from a Project Mogul balloon train. So I think both crashed, but I mean, we'll never know. They'll never tell us for sure. But there's so many things that were verified, that movements by the military that happened after that just like all that wreckage was flown to Wright-Patterson and analyzed by their advanced materials department and stuff. And like, why? If it's just, you know, a bunch of balsa wood. Doesn't make sense. Okay. In this next clip, Stephen Greer is talking about how nukes destroy the universe on a level that we don't understand. And I think
that's right. The ET craft were there. We had do radar done.
I think he's right, and even Eric Weinstein has stated something similar, but we're going to talk about it.
Electromagnetic, one of these directional energy weapons in there that scrambled those craft, and 3 of them crashed from the best I count. 2 of them were recovered right away. One was blown to smithereens, one continued further west, and there was another one that I think was not found till 1950 or 51, more in the northwest mountains of New Mexico. But that all, if you look at the testimony of Colonel Diedrichson, who back in those days in the 60s he was the head of all the Atomic Energy Commission, now Department of Energy, atomic facilities and military. He was an Air Force colonel. And he said, oh yes, every single one of our atomic processing plants, uranium, weapon storage areas, launch missile facilities had been surveilled by these extraterrestrial vehicles because they were such great concern to not only what they could do to this planet, but when they're detonated, they actually are incredibly disruptive. They kind of rip the fabric of the universe. And
that makes it very foreboding. If
Eric Weinstein said something similar. He said he thinks that when we detonated at least the hydrogen bomb, we let out a signal to the universe that was detectable beyond just watching, through a telescope, that we had reached a certain level of technological development. And I talked last week about Eric Weinstein's statements about the twin nuclei problem, which is that we had figured out a way to manipulate DNA, and therefore we have genetic power inside the nucleus of an atom, of a cell, and that we had also figured out the ability to manipulate the nucleus of an atom, and therefore we could have fission and fusion weapons, and fission and fission-fusion weapons, which are hydrogen bombs, and that this is what's going to destroy humanity. And I added a third one and called it the trinuclei problem, and the third one was our manipulation of the nuclear family, which is, men and women and marriage, and how birth control but mainly, but also technological development and specialization and stuff have screwed with and broken apart the nuclear family. And I talked about how there's this common narrative that I see in all three of these problems. It is prediction from sentient singularity theory and my work involved in that if you edit DNA using CRISPR and stuff, you're changing information outside of context of the chemical blockchain that it is, and therefore causing decoherence, and that would cause cascading decoherence over time, and that it would there's no way to fix it. And that means like one out of place gene causes more genes to go out of place, and more genes to go out of place, and more genes to go out of place, essentially, and just cascading decoherence. And information outside of context is not information. So if the mechanisms that are in reading your genes in order to make you function the way that you should can't identify information, the context of information in your genes, it becomes non-information. Okay? It's the same reason why people say genetically modified food is not as nutritional. It's not as nutritious, but then when you go and you do a bunch of lab tests on it, it seems to be as much, if not more. But then the issue, a lot of times at least, but the issue is that it still seems to be screwing up our bodies and things, and in many ways. And it's probably because we're manipulating information outside of context, and it's like if you're eating something and matter is information and information is matter is energy and energy is information, when you're eating something that is material and it's genetically decoherent, there's less information there. And that is like on a meta entanglement level that we haven't quite reached in our mainstream sciences yet. It wouldn't be as detectable if you're just like looking for how much protein is in this carrot. It's like, you could make more protein, but it still might not be as usable by your body because it's not as identifiable by your gut or something. It's this cascading decoherence. This is exactly what happens with nuclear weapons. You separate the protons and neutrons in an atom, and you get free neutrons that shoot out in all these directions. They hit other nuclei, atomic nuclei, and they break apart those atomic nuclei, the bonds between those, and cause even more free neutrons to be released. And it's like this growing amount of free neutrons, or like, which are females, essentially, on a hadronic scale, according to sentient singularity theory. They're like unmarried women, essentially. And just going out and breaking up all these other marriages, essentially. And it's causing cascading decoherence. And this is exactly what we see with human families today, is there's, when people are like, feminism is against the nuclear family. Why would feminism be against the nuclear family? That doesn't make any sense. Well, it's because it's like free feminine energy. It's like free neutrons are causing cascading decoherence. They're breaking apart these nuclear bonds, these nuclear familial bonds on this scale, these nuclei, atomic nuclei on the hadronic scale, which are just marriage on a hadronic scale. Protons are male, essentially. Neutrons are female, essentially. And they're just the quantized active and reactive hadronic beings on that scale. And then you have that in molecules as well, and that cascading decoherence is the problem on all three of these levels of the hadronic, or of this trinuclei problem. That is ripping apart entanglement relationships. Okay? On each time when a marriage breaks apart, it breaks entanglement relationships on the quantum substructure of the universe. You're destroying the order of the cosmos when a marriage falls apart, or when or when there's like chaos, and you're just like, I don't know, people are sleeping around or whatever outside of marriage. It's causing literal decoherence of the cosmos on the level of quantum entanglement. That's also true on the atomic scale when you are having a fission where you're splitting atoms. And it's also true when you're editing DNA outside of context, it's always outside of context if you're editing it from the outside. So if you're selective breeding, that's different because it's not out of context. It's still interlinked with the greater macro context of the holonic structures that contain the DNA, which, like, I have snakes. I keep a ton of snakes if you are new to this channel. And there's, I don't even know, 10, 15 snakes over there or something like that. And I breed them for different colors. And like, it's like multi-generational planning to get the colors that I'm looking for. I'm trying to make one that's all white. That takes, I'm working on it. I'm like 2 generations into the project. That isn't out of context genetic manipulation, because there's coherence in that the genes are being changed in lockstep with the relationships between the beings that contain the genes. That's not true if you're just editing genes inside of beings that aren't doing anything to manipulate the differences to cause changes in their genes. So, but I think that this makes perfect sense that Stephen Greer is saying that we're ripping apart the universe with nuclear weapons. It's not just causing radiation and a big explosion. It's, if you're tapped into the quantum substructure and you can monitor it and you can maneuver within it, then you would notice when someone breaks its decoherence, especially on such a scale as a nuclear explosion, which might be, and when I say such a scale, I don't mean size. I mean, like, it's actually very base level. It's like the lowest level, but it's also the level everything else is built on, is that hadronics level, protons and neutrons, because molecules are built on that, and cells are built on that, and so forth. So if you are ripping apart the order of the cosmos on the hadronic or atomic scale, you're also causing a chaotic, now, like now the pieces don't fit together that you need to, it's like not having a level foundation anymore. Like, now you have to build on a foundation that isn't level and isn't solid. And then something has to build on top of that isn't, and that thing isn't level or solid because what it's built on isn't level or solid. So it's probably worse to break those marriages than even to break our marriages, on the atomic scale versus like the human scale. He's totally right, Stephen Greer. Again, it's pretty impressive. But this is his narrative on why ETs don't reveal themselves. And this is where he's not right, I don't think. But I don't know for sure. I can't claim to know. But it doesn't make logical sense. I think he's being
there would be both
manipulated by them
and human advanced aircraft in there. Meaning the man-made UFOs as well as the ET ones.
It seems that a lot of the control for the disclosure process is actually in the hands of the others, whoever they may be, the whole range of them. What do you think? Yeah, just, the phenomena at large.
No, that's not true. That is not true.
No, you wouldn't say so? I was just going to ask why you think they wouldn't reveal themselves en masse around the world and kind of end this process,
Well, because it's a little corny. It's like the prime directive. First of all, if they were to do that, it would induce worldwide panic because there'd be no context. It would be portrayed as an alien invasion because everyone the media, every movie, Independence Day, all the invasion, Alien from Ridley Scott, all this is going to kick into people's subconscious to the fore. Yeah,
but there's also Close Encounters of the Third Kind, Contact, like Sphere. I don't know. Like there's a ton of Paul where aliens are not like the adversary.
Know that this is not how it should happen. It should happen that humans tell the truth about it for once in our lives. Tell the truth, deal with it directly, educate each other, and begin to make peaceful contact with them in a rational way. If they were to do that, could they do that? Of course. I mean, they could do something that'd be boom, it'd be over.
I don't agree with this. I don't think that they're just waiting for us. I don't think that there's a federation waiting for us to join them. There might be. I might be wrong, and I would not mind being wrong. Like as long as it ideally meant a better situation than I'm predicting. Which, if Stephen Greer is right, then it's better than what I'm predicting, which is that there's like humanoids who live underground who are using us to reproduce, and they're suppressing our tech to keep us under control and manipulating our culture to keep us misled. Like that is my narrative, and that the beings from other planets narrative is a psyop by them, essentially. I don't think they're waiting for us to just get peaceful and tell the truth. They're not that stupid. We won't do that. We are human. We need to go through a black swan total change to our nature in order for us to do that. And if we did do that, it doesn't seem like they've done that. So based on sentient singularity theory, which is that they would form the cells of a single organism, essentially superorganism, and that it would just be recreating another universe. Why didn't they do that? So I don't think they consciously evolved. I do think they had a different technological evolution than us. I don't think they ever used plastics. I don't think they used fossil fuels long enough to develop plastics. I think that they didn't have anybody suppressing their tech, which means it's not like a cosmos filled with infinite, ET civilizations, because why would they not have the same experience that we had? And it doesn't appear like they did. So, like I said, could be wrong, but I think that even Stephen Greer is being manipulated by these things. And like I said, I could be too. I don't know. But I'm just saying, he's a way bigger target than me. I would assume. Like, he's like as big of a target for disinformation as anyone could be in this subject. He has more reach than anyone. And he has a history of credibility. He's the perfect person for you to feed disinformation to. And if you wanted to throw off mass amounts of people and create a false narrative. I don't think that these things are federations from another planet. What's waiting for us to just like, we're just going to wake up one day and be like, oh, you know what? Actually, no more fossil fuels, no more killing anyone. No. The only way that you evolve past like the level of violence that humans portray or commit is if you're totally emotionally entangled, or if you have a higher amount of emotional entanglement, which we are moving towards, and informational entanglement, meaning like you can't get away with things because people see it on the news or it gets beamed to your brain or whatever. If you felt the feelings of everyone that you were about to kill, you'd probably be less likely to kill them. And these beings are telepathic, I believe. That's a very common narrative, and there's reasons why I definitely believe that. If you could feel everybody's feelings before you killed them, you would be less violent. But that doesn't mean that you would evolve into some like just benevolent monk. It just means like you would also reach the technological ability where you could achieve what you need to without killing. Like if you could just pause somebody who is trying to hurt you, just laugh at them instead of like, you know, shooting them with a gun. You could just pause them, laugh at them, and get in your warp speed craft and teleport to the other side of the universe. Like you wouldn't need to kill them anymore. So, but that's different than being wise. It's just being technologically empowered. That's not the same thing as wisdom. I don't think it makes sense for them to just be waiting for us to reach out. Like what? How? I don't know. I mean, I will say though, there is a change in narrative by our government that is unique in our time of acknowledgement of this phenomenon. Maybe they are preparing for a worldwide disclosure. Even if they do, though, I still would be very wary of whatever is told. It's like, you know, 3 presidents from now, they were like, okay, guys, actually, like, there's beings and they're part of this federation. Here they are. And, like, there was a joint meeting between the president and world leaders, and also, like, you know, the reptilians and the Greys all over the news. I would still be hesitant to believe that this was not a psyop with the goal of still controlling us. But he talks about how humans must evolve our consciousness. I do think we're going to evolve our consciousness, but I don't think that happens the way that people think about it. I think it has to do with tech and it's not just like we need to do more meditation. That is not going to evolve your consciousness on a macro scale as a species-wide global global path. It's just not. But he's talking about ETs being benevolent in this clip. And then I think there's one more, and then that's it.
For CE5, peer review.
Well, I mean, people can review what we have done and what we put out already. What I think, in terms of your other question, is if the people who are really addicted to the idea that there's the whole, you know, cowboys and Indians, good name, bad aliens, they don't seem to understand that what part of that assessment is coming from staged events that are deceptive indication and warnings or false flag. And I think it's a very simple to slip into this, because humans always like to have that drama of us versus them. I mean, look at how divided our country is politically. That is something that people feed on that. So how much of that is sort of an acculturation and a sort of a brainwashing, and how much of it is objectively real? Now, having done thousands of hours with thousands of people doing CE5 all over the world and having all kinds of contact experiences. I see no evidence that any of them are hostile or malevolent in any way, shape, or form. All the things.
Why would you, though? Why, and I do believe that he is interacting with beings here. I think he's also being manipulated by the deep state, but also by these beings. But once people send me all kinds of messages in my like direct private messages on Instagram, especially, and they have all kinds of things that they message me. And one of them was sending me messages once years and years ago when I first started my Theory of Every0ne Instagram. They found me somehow and they were like talking to me about aliens and how the moon was an artificial construct, and that that these aliens are feeding on our energy, kind of like adrenochrome, but which it's kind of like the Jupiter ascending kind of thing going on, is what he had basically said. They're feeding on us somehow. They're using our energy. It's like Monsters Inc., but with aliens. And by the way, like, that's a common theme because it's probably there's some degree of truth to it in movies and stuff. Like, there's the only stories that can be told are the stories that can be told. And those stories can be told because they're the stories of reality. That doesn't mean like the details are real and, you know, that Mila Kunis is an alien. Just means like that the idea that there's like these beings that aren't us, that are covertly operating and kind of parasitizing and utilizing us as a resource in some way, shape, or form makes total sense. I think within this narrative, it might all be false, but like probably not. Archetypes are the archetypes of our fiction are the archetypes of our nonfiction too. It's just the details that change. So, but when he says this stuff of like, I've never seen anything that would be malevolent, I asked this guy who slid into my DMs, who was talking to me about aliens, and like, do you think they're hostile? If you believe they're here, do you think they're hostile? I'm not saying I believed everything this guy told me, but I was just like asking him. And he was like, do you like cows? Like, if a cow was like hurt in the road, would you save it? And I was like, yeah. He was like, do you like cows? Like, would you pet a cow and like it could be a companion? It's like, yeah. He was like, do you also eat burgers? I was like, yes. And he was like, okay, so maybe it's more complicated than are they bad or good? It's like, well, maybe they also eat us, but they also think we're cute, but they also, sometimes would just feel bad for us. It's like, we have that relationship with every other animal. Why wouldn't they have that relationship with us? Or with every species out there? We have that relationship. We eat everything, and we also have people who like everything. We also have people who don't like those things. I keep snakes, and I don't eat snakes, but there are people that do eat snakes, and I have eaten snake. I have eaten rattlesnake at a restaurant in Sedona. Okay. I also have snakes. I've even kept rattlesnakes. I also have saved rattlesnakes from the road when I thought they were going to get run over. I've also been on studies where with biologists where a beam of light hits a rattlesnake that's just minding its own business, and then these middle tongs grab it, and then they shove a thermometer up its butt to it gets temperature, and then it's released back, and it goes and probably tries to tell its friend that it was abducted by aliens. And really, it was like the U of A doing a study on rock rattlesnakes. Like that, like I said, there's these common themes that happen because they are the way that things can happen. And life is more complicated than just, is someone bad or good? There are things that are bad and good, but there are actions that are bad or good, but there are not people or beings that are just purely bad or just purely good, other than God, you have to assume is purely good. Even if he can judge himself for making mistakes, and he could say, oh, I've made mistakes, we have to recognize the hierarchy and be like, and operate as if he does not. But it'd be pretty hard to call God on a mistake given his all-knowingness and your limited knowingness. He might have, hindsight from his God's eye view and be like, oh, maybe I shouldn't have flooded the world. But from our perspective, we just have to accept it. And because he's more right than we will ever be. So, this idea that Stephen Greer would see beings behaving in a malevolent fashion at his CE5 events it would never happen, even if they were malevolent, or they were using us to reproduce, or even if they were eating us. They wouldn't do it at a CE5 event if they were trying to keep it clandestine that they were eating us. Okay? He talks about the story on Logan Paul, this podcast, where he said he brought someone who was deaf or had an issue with his hearing his entire life or for many, many years to a CE5 event, and they cured one of these beings, popped out of like the space-time bubble, a little alien, and like cured the guy's hearing. I believe him. I don't think he has a reason to lie about that. I mean, I get people will say that he has a reason to lie about that, but I don't. That's a very specific thing, and it's also involves others, and it's corroboratable, or deniable by others, that I think he has mentioned at some point. So I believe it. I'll take him for his word, at least. That doesn't mean that they don't also use us on their civilizational scale as like a resource, just because they also cured someone's hearing. I have found animals in the wild that were hurt and nursed them back to health and then re-released them, but that doesn't mean I don't also eat animals. Like, I found hurt birds and nursed them back to health and re-released them. Also I made chicken sandwiches last night. So it's just more complicated than, I haven't seen. Why would you? You have to ask, why would you have seen? So, this is one of the last clips, and then I'll answer questions in the chat, and then we'll call it.
Will Smith in Independence Day, let's kick alien butt category. To, a little more rational and deliberative. And this is why I don't see any evidence that there is a hostile or malevolent extraterrestrial group out there. I think there are some rather troublesome interdimensional beings. This is you get to some of these people who work in these spooky programs that are doing Satan worship and devil worship and all kinds of scary stuff.
So where does love?
That is factually accurate. The creator of the Jet Propulsion Laboratory, Jack Parsons, who made our rockets, claims that the devil, or that the Dajjal, which is the Antichrist, told him how to make the rockets. There is, not too far from where I live, a trail called Devil's Ridge or Devil's Bridge or something like that. That is because Jack Parsons used to go up there and have his Satan devil worshipping orgies. And he was very open about this. He was like an Aleister Crowley fan and stuff like that. He wasn't somebody who hid this part of his life. He was pretty open, like massive satanic orgies to get where, demons told them how to build technology. People talk about this in Silicon Valley too, with these machine elves, and they take like drugs to try and have these beings, tell them how to build tech. When Stephen Greer says these interdimensional beings that are malevolent, he sees evidence for that. I do too, but like I said, I think I saw Skinwalker, and I talk about it in a clip on my YouTube channel. You could watch it after this. It's a short, but like, that's when he says interdimensional. Like I said, I think he means like alternate frequency beings, like demons and angels, and maybe ghosts, I don't know, but definitely demons and angels, which is I think skinwalkers are just demons. But Jack Parsons talks about this, and Aleister Crowley's talked about this, and many, many, many people who are socially credible have talked about this. And but I don't think that those are extraterrestrials, or whatever these beings are that we think are extraterrestrials. I think they're like subterrestrials. It's probably a better term. I think I'm going to start calling them that. It's probably these alleged, likely subterrestrial beings, these grays, I think are different than demons and angels. But I also do think that they are using us. I'm not saying that they're bad, or good. I think it's like saying, is humanity good or bad? It's like, I don't know, like both. And so what are these things? Good or bad? Both. But are they trying to control us? I think so. Yeah. Like, but even then, if chickens were aware of what we're doing to them, when they're living in their farms, and like they really knew like what their fate was, they would probably describe us as bad, but like we don't think of ourselves as bad. We're just like, Chick-fil-A is really good and like pretty wholesome company. But so it's important to like, I think thinking about ourselves can teach us more about like the nature of any other being. Instead of looking at them as something else, like think about yourself and similar relationships that you understand, and then because that's the most trustworthy source of information that you have, is your own personal experience, not like Richard Doty's hearsay. It's your own personal experience. If you say you've seen craft flying, if you say that that you like chickens and you also eat chickens, like, then those are things you understand. If Richard Doty says that there was a recovered craft that they used nuclear power to power and they irradiated a neighborhood by accident on their way flying it from Nevada to Texas, there's no way for you to know that. And it doesn't matter either, because it doesn't teach you about like where your place is in all this. And that's what matters, if any of this matters, is like understanding what is our place in this. It's not just what is classified that I don't know that would be interesting to know. It's like, what is our place in all of this? And there's much more trustworthy sources of information than like most of what is the sources of these stories. And I mean, I'm not like, how trustworthy a source of information is Lou Elizondo? I don't know. Richard Doty, I don't know. I think both of them have said true things, and also things that they've been lied to about, and also things that they knew were not true. Lou Elizondo was like, well, we don't know what these things are. It's like, do you think he really believes that? No. I mean, you could say, oh yeah, he's just, he's working people up slowly to like, it's not Russia, it's not China, but it might be, but it's probably not. It might be something else. It might be the atmosphere, but it might also be like little gray humanoid beings from underground. That is, even if you are trying to ease somebody into the truth by telling them something that isn't true, you're still telling them something that isn't true. If you're like, well, we don't really know what it is. The main concern is, what if this is Russia? It's like, stop. But I don't think there is any source in this in ufology of ultimate truth, and I don't think that's true of anything, but I especially think that it's not true in, or that is true in ufology, because there is so much intentional top-down manipulation being done by corporations that have tech that they're trying to keep covered up, governments that have secrets that they're trying to keep classified, and probably also beings that are subterrestrial or something, that are not humans as we know them, that are trying to keep us less powerful than they are. And I think that a lot of the questions that are asked in this community are not good ones. That's true of every field, but like I said, they are especially important in this field. It's like that one guy who messaged me about the aliens years ago. Like, I still don't know how. I'm not saying I think the moon is an artificial creation. I know it rung like a bell when they hit it, in the 1950s, when they crashed craft into it, and they it rung like it was hollow. So maybe, I don't know, but and it is like the dark side of it is like never visible to us. It's like if you wanted to hide something, then you would want to something that was only that had only one face facing everyone, and the other face always facing away from everyone. But I don't know, but I will say that guy, he made me think. He was like, do you eat cows? Do you like to pet cows? And do you also would you save a cow? It's like, yes, all three are true. I'm getting chickens. As soon as we move, we're getting chickens. I like chickens. I'm looking forward to taking care of chickens, and we'll probably name the chickens. We're just going to eat the eggs at first, but maybe eventually, when we get enough chickens, I might start eating the chickens, and freezing the meat. I still like chickens. I will still also just enjoy chickens for chickens, not for eating the chickens, but appreciate them as a sentient being that is interesting to observe and be around, and as individuals. It's I've had pet birds before. You think a parrot is that different from a chicken? So we have to start thinking about this by looking at inward much more than looking outward, especially outward. Staring through telescopes at the sky is not going to give you the answers. And neither is CE5 events, guys. You might see that aliens exist, or that beings exist. This is a picture of the alien from Stephen Greer. I told you I would show it to you. This being. He claims that this was a extraterrestrial, but genetic tests supposedly revealed that it wasn't. This image is enhanced. It's taken during a CE5 expedition on of an ET in the circle with the team. Basically, this is the head, and this is a tunic, basically, he said that it was wearing. This was the original photo, I think, pretty much. You can tell it's a very high ISO photo, which means it was taken without flash, and probably, but it was taken in the dark, and that's why it's so grainy. This, I think, was the original. He said this is a tunic, basically, thing, and this is its head. And this might be real. He said it's inside some type of space-time bubble that it bubbled in from. I'm not somebody who gets on here and calls people liars. I believe him. I'm not going to say I believe him. I'll take him at his word in examining this photo that it is what he says it is. If I examine it as this is definitely fake, then it doesn't add anything. That's just this. It's the trap of skepticism. But I will say All I can tell you as a photographer is that this was taken at an extremely high ISO, attempting to not use flash, which makes sense given the circumstances that the photo was supposedly taken in. And it beaming in or like manifesting from some type of space-time bubble kind of looks like that makes sense there. And but it's obviously it's not a very good photo, but it might be real alien or a real like being, but I don't know. He claims it is, and I have to take him for his word. Otherwise, like, why would I? If you think somebody is just a total liar, then why are you even thinking about their statements at all? Like, you should be ignoring them entirely. They're a waste of your time. If you don't believe that you can trust that what somebody tells you is what they think is the truth, then you cannot honestly justify spending any like energy like trying to engage with their statements. I don't think Stephen Greer is somebody who has lies any more than anyone else, and I'll take him at his word for these things, but I don't think he's correct on some of this stuff. He is clearly correct on a lot, and likely correct on a lot, but also likely being manipulated more than anyone else. Not as much, more, because he is the guy you would try and manipulate. It's like everybody who's listening to him thinking they're the truthers. Like, they're not just the truthers of the normal people who think that UFOs exist. They're the truthers of the UFO people who think that even the mainstream UFO people, like the, To the Stars Academy and Tom DeLonge and Lou Elizondo, are all liars, and that they know the like true truth, and they want to go straight to the source and communicate with these beings, which they might do in CE5. CE5, this meditation type of thing that is used to communicate supposedly with these beings, makes sense. Even Lou Elizondo said, if they're basically able to detect like consciousness in energy involving consciousness or something like changes in entanglement, then they, if a bunch of people are all meditating on the same thing, then it's like a bright beam of light. It's like easier. You're making yourself easy to see and find for these beings who can pick up on it potentially. I also know people who I trust who told me in confidence that they meditated and UFO appeared above them, and it was like them and their friends, and it was like 5 or 6 people, something like that. They all saw this thing, and I totally trust the person who told me. And I will say, this is the weirdest thing. Every time that I saw, out of the 2 times that I saw UAPs or UFOs or whatever, I got the weirdest feeling like they wanted me to see them. I cannot explain that. I do not know why. I'm not saying that I was interpreting things properly. I got a feeling like they wanted me to see it. Like, it was there for me to see. I have never gotten that feeling when I see an airplane in the sky. Like, I've seen the B-2 stealth bomber fly over my house, and I did not get a feeling of like, they want me to see. When in reality, like, they did want me to see. Like, it was like on its way to the air show in Tucson, and it like flew over a bunch of neighborhoods all over town so that people could see it, and like that was the point. But I didn't get a feeling of like I was being shown something intentionally. It was just like, that's awesome, that's cool looking plane. But when I saw these UAPs, UFOs this past year, I think so one in 20, first one was in 2021, the other one was this year, a few months ago. Like I said, there's a video of the first one on my YouTube channel. It's not the most impressive video, but just know it was the most impressive thing I've ever seen. It was the brightest light I've ever seen in the sky besides the moon and the sun. And the video does it no justice. But there are things about the video that you notice that it jumps from one spot to another in like instantly. And which is amazing. Like, it moves like miles. Moves from like over Eagle Rock if you know LA, to like over like Griffith Park in like not even a second. I lose it. I'm like, it goes like a tree. We drive by a tree and I'm like, where'd it go? And then I look and it's like over Griffith Park in front of us now, not like to the side of us. We were driving down the 210. I mean, you almost don't even realize it in the video because you have to know where we are to realize it. And also it's not like you see it go like this. It's like you just don't see it anymore. And then it's like over there. It's weird. So even if it's just kind of like a light in that video, it still does things when you really, really take a close look at the video that don't make sense. Last thing that Stephen Greer was asked was like, what's your inspirational message, basically? And he said that the secret tech that the government and these deep, black projects are controlling, if revealed, would make a beautiful world. Let me tell you something. Technology is a tool, and the same exact technology can be used beautifully and also be used not in a horrible way. And I'm not saying that this tech would not benefit the world in many ways. Probably would, but technology is only as good as the person wielding it. Is only as good as the action of the person wielding it. That's what I'll say. And that's not to deny his statement, but it's just to elaborate on it. I don't think that physics saves the world. God and the logos process that we're in of the universe reproducing saves the world. And it's done somewhat through technology to some degree, but also it's just inevitable. It's not like we need to figure out warp speed and temporal manipulation through geometric unity, or else we're all doomed. No. Or even the idea that if we don't get free energy, like the Earth is going to be destroyed because of fossil fuels. No. But it would be nice. Anyways, I'm going to make a moderator of the chat next time. If you want to be a moderator and you are consistently here, it can be multiple people. Let me know, and I will make you a mod of this channel, and you can delete all of these bots that are in the chat. Please ask any final questions. Please hit the like button if you have not. And just know we have our Discord call this Thursday at 7 p.m. like normal. If you would like to be a part of that, it's a great time. We talk about anything anybody wants to talk about from 7 p.m. Pacific to midnight. If you want the Discord link to join our community, private message me on Instagram. Also, I am premiering an interview that I did with Robert Edward Grant on geometry and consciousness and economics, politics, all kinds of stuff on either Thursday morning or Friday morning. I'm not sure when I'm going to release it yet. I have scheduled it already, so you can check the schedule. If it changes, then you'll see the change probably. But that is premiering later this week, and it's also already available on my Instagram, but it will be time-stamped and everything on YouTube, and it's I like listening to things on YouTube. I have YouTube Premium, so I don't even have to have my phone open. I can like shut the screen off, and it'll just keep playing like it's music or podcast. I recommend YouTube Premium if you use YouTube a lot. It's very nice. But even if you don't have YouTube Premium, you can minimize a window and listen to it. Whereas like Instagram, listening to things on Instagram is annoying because you have to have it open the whole time. And our talk is 2 hours long. So that means you have to sit on Instagram for 2 hours. That is not ideal. Fatima's last secret message to the Pope. I don't know who that is, but that sounds interesting. Personally, other alien race shouldn't even be something we need to focus on. Yeah, it's not an area of focus. But I'm somebody who talks about it a lot, but I think that it's interesting. I'm not saying that I like change my life because of it. I don't change my life because of this topic. But somebody, it's Vlad Day, said, we are part of a symbiotic relationship with something which disguises itself as an extraterrestrial invasion so as not to alarm us. Terrence McKenna. That is brilliant. It is very much similar to what I believe. I screenshotted it at some point during the stream, so if you saw that, it's just because I thought that quote was great. Anyways, with that, guys, like I said, please hit the like button. Follow this channel. Hit the bell notification. I do this every Tuesday at around 7 p.m. Private Discord calls that are open every Thursday at 7 p.m. And more interviews to come. And also, we'll be revealing a walkthrough before the end of the year of sentient singularity theory and the paper that I've been working on. So, with that, thank you and peace.